Right. Well, I guess we should begin. Thank you. First of all, thank you to Herriot University for hosting us in this lovely spot. For those of you on the millions of people zooming in on the webcam, thanks for joining us. You're missing out on a great spot here in the Climate Hub here in Dubai, where there's a lot of climate tech SMEs showing off their innovations on the floor above us. Very exciting. But for today, as we are on Friday, it's Friday the 8th of December, we are here to talk about measurement and regulation and how that impacts sustainable innovation and what have you. My name is Jonathan Ashton. I'm the head of marketing and communications at Krona. We're an industrial family-owned company making metering and measurement equipment. And the topic of measurement is obviously very important to us because we need to follow those regulations and help inform them so that people can be reporting transparently and we can all hopefully move forward into a much more sustainable future together. That's why we're all here at COP28. But I'm joined by a fantastic panel, in fact. We've got from across the world, from across different industries and bringing their different perspectives to the table. I'm just going to hand over to you now, just to pop down one by one. Please introduce yourselves and give your elevator pitch. Thomas, why are you on this panel?
First of all, thank you very much. My name is Thomas Kuruvilla. I'm with the firm called Arthur D. Little, responsible for their Middle East and India operations. Yeah. Why am I on this panel? I'm extremely passionate about this topic. There are a lot of progress, but I'm not happy with the progress so far, right? And the reason I'm saying this is over the last many years, I have done strategies for public sector and many private companies, and 60 to 70% of them do not address this topic in their official strategy, in their official KPIs, in the official remuneration for their leadership and to their management, right? So at the end of it, we talk about it a lot, but I don't see that getting implemented in companies and to get this moving forward. And I hope by these type of discussions and sharing it, we can help and force and encourage companies to move forward on this topic.
That's great. Thank you. You'll pick up a microphone, sorry, because you'll need it for like I said, the millions of people who are tuning in on the webinar. Neha, please. Sorry. Neha, you survived our panel on Wednesday talking about SMEs working with large corporations, sorting out their scope 3 emissions, but you joined me today, measurement and regulation. Why are you here? Or maybe is it turned on? Just turn the switch on.
Hello. Yeah, there you go. Hi, everyone. My name is Neha. I advise governments in reaching their SDGs, specifically around climate. And hopefully today, I would love to bring into the conversation the role of governments, moving past just regulation, right? I think we always think about government as restricting innovation and restricting access. But I think what government tries to do, at least, the intention is to create that balance between not having too much fraud and leaving enough space for innovation. And I hope we can sort of discuss that in the concept of regulation and measurement around climate.
Thank you. Mr. Erms, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for having me. My name is Oliver Erms. I'm managing the German Emirati Joint Council for Industry and Commerce. It's a private, not-for-profit organization with a certain government mandate and a little bit of government money in it as well. But again, private organization, membership-based, and obviously Krona is one of the many proud, hopefully 600 plus corporate members that we have here in the UAE. I'm certainly here to bring in the German perspective, at least that's my guess. We have been managing for the last 6 years a government-to-government energy and climate partnership between the UAE and Germany. So we have some good experiences when it comes to introducing, let's say, technologies, regulations, thoughts to the region in terms of sustainability, energy efficiency, hydrogen, very recent topic. And of course, as a German citizen, I'm observing how the German government is positioning itself. And it's definitely fair to say that Germany, the German government, has been pushing the COP agenda very much. But there's also a private sector position, and that's the one that I would like to introduce today.
Great, thank you so much, Oliver. Maxime, last but certainly not least, you've come in from Brussels, not especially for this panel, but you've been in the blue zone, hanging out with the government affairs thoughts and things. But it'd be great to hear your perspective as well, please.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. So Maxime Bureau, yes, I'm doing two things at a 3M company. 3M and EMEA, we have roughly 20,000 employees, and I want to give credit to Mickey and Raya, who is here, who did a fantastic job. So I do two things: it's government affairs and sustainability, ESG. Why I say that is because these are two teams today, or when I've been asked to lead these two teams. And what we experience every day is that actually is very intertwined. And it's exactly the discussion of today. You have the regulation from the side of the government, but actually you address an issue which is more on the governance and Europe, we say environmental, social governance, okay, the famous ESG, or corporate social responsibility. I remember we were saying that some years ago. So why I'm happy to be here to listen to all of you here, to see the different perspective. My concern is, and 3M, we are a 120 years old company, diverse, a conglomerate. So transparency, accountability is something which makes a lot of sense for very long, because we report to our Securities and Exchange Commission every quarter. And now we have the non-financial reporting world to address and to cope with, which is great. But it's where I'm interested to listen, because we have some concern that the regulator makes things too complex. And I put this word is a bit maybe excessive, but it's probably, that's what we want to discuss this morning. Thank you.
And that's great you mentioned that. Obviously, I think listed companies have that reporting mandatory, really, and Kroner's still family owned. We've only been doing our sustainability report for the last 3 years, and it's, we're very much at the beginning of our journey. So that's actually why I'm sat here, is to listen, hopefully, to you guys and see what I can take back internally to the company and drive forwards. Now, Thomas, I think another reason why I lured you to the panel was because I know at the World Government Summit here in Dubai, Arthur D. Little, you released the net zero, was it the countdown report? There we go. And I just wondered if you have maybe a bit of an overview on that, because I think it's not all 80 pages, but if you give us a bit of an overview, and certainly the regulatory aspects of that, because I think it's really crucial. You sort of touched upon it in your introduction there.
Yes. Yeah, I will keep it 1 minute. It's an 80-page report. It was primarily coming in from a public sector angle, looking at the regulation, what is an appropriate regulation that is required, what are the transparency requirements, and what needs to be addressed to take this forward. That was the summary of the report. Just giving a perspective on what has happened after that report and what's happening in COP28. At that time, it was extremely clear when we did that report that the intentions are clearly there, documented, commitments are made, right? Like 76% of the countries which contribute 90% of the GDP has made official commitments towards net zero, right? Around 75 to 76% of the emissions, they have committed to becoming net zero. You see what I'm saying? So we are talking about 80 to 85% of the entire globe making a commitment. And then, but it is lacking on implementation, let me put it that way, right? And the report goes into what is required for implementation. It is just not commitment. It is not just intention. It is about you need to implement. And it talks about the requirement of transparency to start with. Unless you are very transparent, people don't even trust each other. You need transparency, then you can trust each other. You need to have consistent measurement systems so that you can compare, you can benchmark, you can learn from each other. That is also not taken care as of now. There's a lot of funding requirements, but the funding doesn't make ESG mandatory for the funding today. There's a lot of requirements of public-private partnerships, but again, the regulation related to public-private partner, public-private partnership, it's more economic and financial return versus ESG compliance, right? So the report goes through all the specific requirements. I'm personally confident that if all of that is implemented, supported by the government, we will move forward on it, but the implementation is still lacking. And I wish to listen what will be the outcome of the COP28 and whether we can see whether we have moved ahead in implementation, not just talking about the intention and commitment. Yeah, and that is what I would look forward in the next as an output of COP28. And we can see from the report that we produced in the World Government Summit, and when we produce a next report, what will be the status that will get reported.
No, thank you for that. That's really, really important. I was going to say actually, because we're towards the end of COP28. There's still maybe four more official days. It may stretch on beyond that, but it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts maybe later on from the panel about what we want to hear, maybe on the 12th, 13th, 14th of December, where that comes from, and maybe what we expect to hear based on where the discussions have gone so far. So that's really interesting. I'll just say actually as well, obviously I've got open here is the chat function on the Teams. So anybody that's logged in there, if you want to fire any questions there as well, and anybody in the room, if you have any burning questions, be careful in the room, because if you raise your hand, I do have a padded microphone there, which will be coming towards you at velocity. So just be ready to catch that as you go. Okay. But thank you.
The pad is very firm.
It's a firm pad. Thomas has tested the microphone already. It's very firm. So watch out for that. Okay, very good. But so if we just move through now, a few sort of points here. Maxime, if I can come over to you, maybe to open proceedings down at the end there. Thomas talked about, well, practically everything in the report there. So, you know, the transparency and the what's needed to move things forward for climate action. But what are your thoughts on that whole transparency piece, and what are the main challenges for whether it's private sector, I guess that would be from your perspective in achieving that?
Yes, thank you. You see, I came prepared because, I mean, if we talk about numbers, you need to have the numbers right because that's the issue you said today. I mean, as we all see, if I put a data point out on the net, you will question it. You want to understand, is it a real data point? So I will quote, I was checking yesterday a little bit what was on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I got a quote which was a good, I think, starting point for us today. It's from Brad Smith from Microsoft. So, and he says simply put, you cannot fix what you cannot measure. I think we all know it, but it's good that he says it. We say it too. I guess we will agree with that. So, you know, at 3M, we are a conglomerate. So a conglomerate, diverse. So we have, you know, consumer products. I don't have my Post-it notes with me, but you know what I mean. This is the yellow sticker, very useful. But that's nice. But we have also healthcare products. Also, we have energy. We work in the energy sector, telcos for semiconductors, and so on transportation. You know, for example, for safety, you may remember, you know, the road signs or the road marking we put a bit everywhere, which to protect people and to protect especially children, by the way, when they go to school. So long story short is it's complicated in a company like 3M. We can do scope 1, scope 2. Here we are good. But the scope 3, we have to recognize that it is an adventure. It's a journey. Why? Because we have 55,000 products today. And I think even a bit more, but it gives you the diversity. The big issue is we have is a problem of integration of systems. We have so diverse system from the supply chain to the end. That how do you get organized? And that's why we use consultants very often to help us to do that. But that's a real challenge. So what to tell you, transparency, accountability, yes, obviously we are on it. We are actually in Europe. You have the non-financial reporting directive, which has been published by the EU. We are already complying with it. Comply does not mean anything. Obviously, we all comply. But what we are, I will say, nurturing it. We are very positive on it. So we do it, for example, and it's not mandatory. It will become mandatory very soon. And I will spare you so many acronyms that we have in Europe for legislation, but it will be mandatory, and we do that already in countries like the Nordic countries, like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, but we'll continue to do it. Germany, interestingly, and I'm sure Oliver will tell us a bit more, you have a supply chain legislation, which is a superb document, superb in its complexity. And we have, for example, nominated a human rights officer from last year because per the law. I think it's a good initiative, by the way. So happy to give you more details, but it's complex, but it's great to do it. And we need to do it. We deserve to do it. We need to do it also at our responsibility to society and to our customers.
I think it's good that you mentioned Germany there. Coming to you shortly, Oliver. But the supply chain legislation, Krona, is actually trying to export that globally. So we, a net zero strategy we just launched. It's I think we're mirroring Germany as a company, so we'll hit our targets there globally. So I think it's really important. I'm actually quite, as a Brit, this is hard to say. It shouldn't be hard to say, but post-Brexit, mistake. But as a European, I think it's very important what's happening in Europe, especially in Germany. So how that hopefully leads other companies to greater transparency. What are you hearing in the German business community, Oliver? Are they having issues with the Supply Chain Act, or is it a good opportunity?
Well, it starts with the name of the law. And you know what the name of the German law is?
I think it's a very long word that I can't pronounce.
Yeah, that's the acronym. It's the Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz.
Say the
It's
beginning
a
again.
word. Single word. Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz.
Very good. We'll be testing
English,
you all later.
Supply Chain Act. Yeah. So yeah, it's obviously a German law. There's a European layer that will kick in by the 1st of January next year, I guess. It's a complicated topic, I have to say. Yeah, while we understand the intention of the legislator, the German Parliament in this case, we also understand and appreciate the intention of the law. It's just another, let's say, a bubble of red tape the German companies have to deal with. For the time being, it only affects large corporates. It's a limited number. The lower the threshold is set, and this is, let's say, gradually happening throughout the next couple of years, not at least due to the fact that the European legislation is even stricter than the German one. Sooner or later, it will also affect medium-sized companies like Krone, for instance, large medium-sized companies. The idea is that whoever's importing products into the European Union or into the German market has to make sure that certain standards, ESG standards, are met throughout the value chain or the supply chain of the specific product. Sounds easy. It might be easy for certain industries. I'm also overlooking German-Pakistani business relations. The Pakistani textile industry, for instance, is perfectly equipped already because the ones supplying IKEA or other German or European retail companies, they have been dealing with it for many years already. But you imagine a nice German car where the leather is coming not necessarily from German cows, where the dyes are coming from other parts of the world, aluminium coming from the UAE. It starts to get very complicated. It's a beautiful job for IT companies because behind this, ideally, you have a brilliant AI triggered software. But for the typical medium-sized German company, and unfortunately, very often they are overlooked also in the German discussion, comprising of 150, 250, 300 employees, it's quite complex. It's quite complex. So the German industry has been heavily criticizing the legislation, especially due to the complexity. And I would love to continue to talk about sustainability aspects. We have another legislation starting to become effective by the 1st of January, the CBAM, cross-border adjustment mechanism. Very similar approach, let's say a same degree of complexity. So it's difficult, let's say, to make hands join between what is politically desirable and at the end of the day, which can be managed by the many medium-sized companies that we have across Europe.
I think you mentioned the complexity there, and that's probably the big issue. Coming in, I was in a discussion on Sunday morning about the just transition in the global south, and they're in a very different part of the journey there. You mentioned obviously mentioned Pakistan and other markets, and it's just that very different position. Obviously, Maxime coming in from Europe, and we're sat here in a very developed and very advanced economy, I'd say, but to come in with one legislation, because at the end of the day, it affects every single country. I was actually talking to Frank, my VP, about this. He plays golf, and I said, "Is there any way of maybe putting a handicap on different countries and sort of saying, well, yes, this is the blanket legislation, but obviously you've got some countries that have a lot more that they have to do. Do they get this financial support extra?" I think that's what's happening now, obviously, with the loss and damage fund and what have you. You touched upon AI and digitization and what have you. Thomas, I know we were talking about that over coffee just now. Would you be able to add into that maybe a few thoughts?
Yes, when I looked at the question is about technology related to carbon emission and all of that, but I think that's not even the right question.
I can't believe you said that.
I don't even agree with that question. See, let me tell you, again, there are a lot of good things that's happening, but the purpose, at least what I want to share, is where I think we need to improve, right? So when we look at these topics, we are not trying to fundamentally relook at the overall business model to address these topics. We are just trying to address these topics within the current ways we are operating. You see, it's a very, very different. When we talk about digitalization, see, I have done digitalization or digital transformation across all the sectors in the last 24 months, right? Now, any sector you take today, at least there is 20 to 30% of the assets that are not utilized because you have not fully implemented digitalization. Let us talk about supply chain, right? The supply chain, are we trying to optimize the entire supply chain across the globe? No, we are not. We still have competing supply chains. What does that mean? That means that you are having infrastructure, you are having activities which is 20, 30, 40% more than what is required. So you're trying to reduce, or you're trying to continue the set of current activities and move towards net zero, versus you could have eliminated 40% of the activities. You see where I'm coming from? Like, for example, you take a hospital today, right? I can prove it that you can service the same number of patients with 40% less hospital capacity. Now, we are trying to have a hospital meet a net zero target, but your carbon emission would have been reduced by 40% if you reduce the hospital capacity by 40% by efficiently using it. And I sincerely believe that the impact on net zero will be much more by relooking at the business model and optimizing the assets that are getting consumed, reducing the assets, reducing the activities without reducing the outcome at all. And the impact on this will be much higher in my view. And that is where I'm coming from. When we talk about government regulations, we are not going to that level of optimization to achieve net zero targets, in my view. We are just trying to tell you, we are not questioning your activities. When you're doing your activities, make it net zero. You see the difference, yeah. So I know it is going beyond the basic topic, but I think we should elevate the discussion to that level. And why I'm saying this again, I'll repeat one sentence, because I have gone through every sector, and I can very logically take any sector and prove it to you that 30 to 40% of the activities that we are doing today can be completely eliminated. I can prove it.
Is this working? I think that's really provocative, Thomas, that you're saying, and I I think it's very interesting. You want to take it much broader, and you mentioned hospitals there and healthcare. We've just come through the pandemic a couple of years ago, and I don't know the full global landscape, but I believe that they were already very stretched. I mean, now maybe we're back to a more normal cadence of people needing healthcare potentially, but I don't know. So if that was to come around again and we've optimized, do you think that would be a big issue? I completely agree with you. I think things need to run much more efficiently.
The question is, if the pandemic comes again,
Mm.
let me just give you one example on digitalization itself. Just because of the pandemic, look at how much optimization happened on asset utilization. We may be unhappy about the pandemic, but I can tell you that, again, we were trying to push net zero. We are trying to push optimization of assets. We have been consulting with clients for 5, 10, 15 years, and they don't change. The pandemic came in, everybody changed in 6 months' time, for example. You see what I'm saying? So it can be done. It is just that we don't want to do it. And when we were forced to do it, we did it very quickly, right?
Does anyone else have anything they want to add on that topic? If there's, I mean, Oliver, you started digitization. Neha, you're smiling at Thomas's.
Thomas pointed to me quite a few times during that, so I feel like I have to respond. Right?
Yes, you must.
When it comes to regulations, definitely, I think digitalization has pushed out of necessity through the pandemic, and that in itself, reduces waste, which in itself is leading us to net zero. I think other policies that we have, which may not seem very climate related, but actually do help, are localization policies, especially in the Middle East, right? They really help build local capacity, and they also help just remove transport emissions, right? When you're trying to export a lot of or import a lot of sustainable products from across the world, when really what we should be importing is the knowledge to be able to build that locally and really build that ecosystem locally, right?
I really like.
And so I think what I would love to see more from local governments in the Middle East is how do you bring that knowledge in and build SMEs locally and build the ecosystem locally so that we actually then become a hub for the global South and we can start exporting that knowledge going forward, because we are working to, your comment previously, like we in the global South are working in a very different context and it needs to be a global South to South partnership rather than a North to South partnership. I think it's just a bit more effective with, of course, a lot of great knowledge coming from the global North, but I think with in a different context and a different pace and different local cultural sensitivities as well.
Can I just add?
Of course. As long as there's a reference to regulatory or measurement aspects. So we're back on the topic that we're here for today.
Yeah, I really liked what you talked about localization, and I'll just give you one simple example, because I see people saying that I'm becoming a vegetarian, right? And I'm now contributing to something that is good. But if you just look at the parameters, they don't look at the carbon emission related to importing vegetables from Europe versus getting meat done in Dubai. I'm just giving an example. It's linking to measurement. The measurement itself is misleading. So when somebody says by eating vegetables, I'm contributing to the world, it is completely wrong, because the vegetables are getting imported and the carbon emission related to that importing of vegetables is significantly higher than the carbon emissions related to producing meat locally, as an example of measurement, for example.
Don't need to raise your hand. Oliver, please.
In class, yeah. It's very important to underline that there shouldn't be the expectation that we have one solution that fits all countries and all communities around the globe. On the other side, it's important to continue to discuss, do we need more regulations or do we possibly need other incentives for triggering change? We have in Germany very much disputed new regulation, which is trying to force property owners to replace the good old oil or gas-fired heatings by heat pumps over a series of years. The question is, do we need such a regulation, or can we just, let's say, try to have, let's say, the price play its role, by increasing on introducing a carbon tax, which we have in Germany already. It's relatively modest because politics is afraid of people taking it to the streets, right? But that's something that we should continue to discuss, I would say. I'm not sure it fits, let's say, the emerging economies, Southeast Asia, South Asia, or the country I'm very often traveling to, Pakistan. It's a highly political issue. But for mature economies, including the UAE or Germany, it might be an issue, right? Why not introducing carbon tax and let the market forces do what they need to do? Yesterday, I spoke to a member. It's a big facility management company. They have a fleet of 60 trucks. The good old trucks manufactured, don't want to mention any brand, manufactured in Ras Al Khaimah. You can imagine what the carbon footprint of these trucks is. So how can I convince this family-owned German company to replace the fleet of 60 trucks here in the UAE, right?
And exactly right. It's the carrot and the stick situation. How do we do that? I was in another session on green hydrogen a couple of days ago, and they were talking about actually maybe it's the optimizing aspect and measuring that optimization. They're talking about using hydrogen in trucks, and there's a technology that they have which is retrofitting. So you don't need to replace the whole truck, but by adding a certain amount of hydrogen into, I think 40% into the diesel, you reduce your carbon output by 40%. Without any big initial costs there, which is pretty good. Mr. Maxime, you had.
No, I tried to make the link between closing this on the supply chain that Thomas and Nia raised, and go back to regulation. So I have one for you here. Just want to say it's interesting indeed, the COVID. I mean, it was a disaster, but to your point, I mean, how we have optimized, rethought many of our work. I mean, for example, all of us, we travel less, better, but we travel, it's more qualitative. You go to meet the people. You don't do a review of PowerPoint for 3 days. You meet the people. So that's one thing I wanted to park, but I agree a lot with you, Thomas. It's and both of you with Nia too, is localization. We have at 3M, we have regionalized our supply chains. So it's before we were doing China for China, it was obvious, but it's even more China for China. We thought about Middle East to create something more. We did not achieve what we want to do, to be frank, in Middle East and Africa. We will do more. But you see in Europe, for example, on US, we try also to compartment more what we do for Europe, and US for US, or the Americas. So that's one fact. And I think it's interesting. And actually, if you think about carbon emissions, it makes a lot of sense. Your vegetable remark it's a very good one. It's appalling when you buy something from, if I buy from Chile, carrots from Chile, I mean, I exaggerate, in London, does not make a lot of sense. So back to your business now. So that's I think we think local is great here. Then regulation. I would argue we have to be the opposite on regulation, because to the point is non-financial reporting, or all this different legislation we see now with LKSG for Germany, or it's at urban level is CS3D, which will be the same as due diligence directive, corporate social responsibility, CSRD, corporate social responsibility directive. I mean, all of them. Here you need harmonization at more global level, because as a US company, we know that the Securities and Exchange Commission is preparing now its standards. So we'll have US standards. You have the ISSB, which is based in London, which is preparing for the international standards. Brazil has already moved. Japan is moving. That's where, so do you see, we need localization for probably for different reasons, as we discussed before. In terms of manufacturing, we could do much better. But in terms of regulation, and that's why the COP28 or the COP, this forum is useful. We need to move forward on guidance or guidelines more than, as you say, prescriptive laws. We need to give guidance, because the UAE will apply things differently that will do France probably, or what will do Brazil or Japan. So that's what we need to give, is guidance that we can all agree with measurement which are objective. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not quantum physics. Huh? It's you have the facts, you know where your greenhouse gases, you have your different categories, you have scope 1, 2, 3. That's, I think we have a framework, a methodology. That's what we should execute now.
And but by driving, whether it's global or local regulatory frameworks, how is that impacting the innovation piece? I don't mean to keep you on the stand, so to speak, but if anyone else has anything to add on the innovation piece before, and I know Thomas, maybe you're working with a lot of innovative companies, are they being impacted by this regulation, or or are you recommending to follow government guidance and incentives if those exist in the region? Sorry to put you on the spot there. I'm just
no, I think that is very good from the government perspective, that there is definitely a lot of support on investments related to innovation that can reduce emissions and carbon emissions. That's definitely the case. Yeah. But again, I will still link it to the previous topic that I made. It is because even when we talk about innovation or investing in technology, we are still doing it on a piecemeal basis. We are not looking at it holistically. Sometimes we are trying to correct carbon emission, sometimes you're talking about net zero, sometimes you're talking about something else, and we're handling things independently, which is making it very, very inefficient. And even from a public sector side, regulatory side also, the innovation, see, you cannot implement innovation in a company related to net zero. You cannot. It has to be holistic innovation philosophy for the entire business. How are you going to innovate your overall business model that will optimize so many things? Along with that, carbon emissions, net zero, ESG gets optimized, right? But the regulation doesn't come in that way. The regulation comes or individual items versus looking at it all together. And then it actually makes the cost of innovation much higher than what it was required if we looked at it in a much more holistic fashion. You see, so while it is facilitating innovation, it is not facilitating it to make it most optimized.
okay.
Yeah. One more item. Again, there are no synergies between organizations on innovation. Innovation is an extremely costly item, right? But again, you have to start seeing whether you can synergize on investments related to innovation on these topics, because it is a very high capex long-term investment and you're duplicating investments. Then again, people will not do it because it's going to be extremely costly, versus centralizing these type of thinking and innovation on these topics, right? Yeah.
I see.
Very briefly, indeed, there is a regulatory cost. It's not me. We had a discussion last week with the Wall Street Journal and a lot of other companies. We want strong regulation. A company like 3M wants strong regulation, but we want indeed innovation, with legislation which is, I would say, innovation proofed or even investment proofed. Will you invest with this innovation, with this legislation, or will you stop or wait? Ultimately, we need to help the legislator to prepare, to propose legislation. We will stimulate innovation, stimulate investment. As a European, my job is to attract investment from my headquarters. I'm trying to fly my CEO, I pitch him, we meet people in Europe so that he puts the cash of the company in Europe. Here, regulation is extremely important. Today in Europe, I'm afraid that I think we'll see it in Germany or in France or even the UK. It's difficult. So we need to help the legislator to continue to have a better legislation, which is easier and cheaper to comply with. Otherwise, big companies like us, we can't do it. I will lose some cash to do it. Okay, I reduce innovation. The money I put for compliance with the regulation, I don't put it in innovation, even more at an SME level. So that's where we need to have better legislation, which are easier to comply with, so that it's cheaper, and then we can put the money where we are the best at, is at innovation and technology.
I was just going to say, does that compete with the whole localization thing we were just talking about? So if you're, for example, if your European regulation is more amenable to investment from that side, but maybe you're not maybe.
That's why I mentioned the investment attractiveness. Yeah. If I have a regulation which is too tough, I will say, oh, then we go maybe to another jurisdiction because we can work better and in an easier way.
If I can just add to that as well, like I think a lot of times that, and we're seeing that a lot in the region as well, where they're adding ESG policies and ESG criteria in the investment. So if you want to have a big PPP contract with the government, there are certain criteria you have to go with. That is both localization, amortization, Southization, but also on the environment end, right? And I think that definitely starts to mainstream a lot of these things, which is definitely good. But I think we've spent a lot of time talking about regulation or legislation, but regulatory bodies also have a role to play in terms of just gathering data and showcasing that for innovation and everything else to take place. So if I was just give an example, so if for those who don't know, it's mandatory in the UAE to give ESG reporting if you are publicly listed, right? And there's about 100 plus companies. But right now, the quality really varies, right? There's some big companies who do amazing reports, and there's small companies. At first, it's a bit more of a tick box exercise. Again, not necessarily out of fault, but it's also just the resources they have. But if you look at, for example, Singapore and Hong Kong and the kind of resources they have available, I love what they do. So there's one report where every year they put out a report on the reports. So the quality of reports that are on this stock exchange, they actually do a report on that to say, these are all the disclosures that happened. This is what happened in E, S, and G. They break it down by industry. And what that does is, of course, first increases transparency and trust in the system that someone is actually reading these reports and putting sort of a quality score on it. Helps attract investment in a general sense. Also tells companies that we're serious about this. But also for the regulator, it makes sure that they know where the capability building needs to happen. If more people are really focusing on the S but not on the E, that's where we need to focus. That's where we need to put in more regulation or policies or incentives, right? Another thing they do, which I love, is I think Singapore does this, where they have a guide for investors how to read sustainability reports, right? So it's not just about, hey, you company do this and tick box, but it's just actually telling the whole ecosystem how to use this data and how can you look at risk through this data and how do you read these reports. And that level of capability building, that level of having an ESG academy and self-paced understanding of how do I use this rather than it just being like a year of sustainability, I did this thing. I think that's something that regulatory bodies can also add on to, and that's something where we also need to move towards. So it's not just always a stick and carrot, but a guidance that actually moves the whole ecosystem towards it.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. I just think probably the sign of a mature market when you got to that point and you've got the ranking there. As long as it's coming from a very objective source, that's pretty good. Okay, so I guess we're getting there. We're getting there. In terms of the accountability and sort of corporate responsibility and accountability, we talked about the regulation, we talked about the reporting. Is that enough to do that? We've been involved in a few panels this week on mistrust, reputation. Obviously, greenwashing comes up around COP28. Maxime.
Quickly, because I think we want to give space for all, but I think we discussed it already. And that's why I mentioned globalization, or the word harmonization is a bit dangerous because we are a very diverse world. Even in Europe, we have 27 member states. We miss the UK, by the way. But we'll see later, But simply, I think for me, standard is guidelines which are common. So that's we need to find bridges because today you have a lot of standards, and I pass you the acronyms, ESRS, ISSB, or you can I can give you a lot of. So conclusion here to this point for me, I think it's really how we have global standard or alignment that we can work for each other. Otherwise, we waste a lot of time of many people. And so we need very clear data points that you want to give. If Thomas and Nia in the government tells me, okay, we want you to know about carbon emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, now we have a lot of with the global, the UNGC, the Global Compact, the UN, we work actually 3M. We have been very engaged with the UNGC. I think there are a lot of good brand which has been put in over there. Let's use that. Let's not reinvent the wheel, and that's what we try. And I think with Oliver, we need to do that in Germany or in Brussels or in our different capitals to say, guys, we are extremely supportive. That's what is important. We are for regulation. I don't want to think, oh, they don't want regulation. Is to no, but we are for smart regulation, and where you have more global standards that we can apply everywhere, and then you can compare. Otherwise, it's apple and pears, and you don't understand anything, and it's confusion. And then after you will say, oh, this is greenwashing. Well, yes or no. I think it's more complex than that. So that would be my answer, more global approach.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would just like to add to have a bit more confidence in the forces of the market and especially also of the power of consumers. You mentioned a very important point, brand trust in brands, confidence in, let's say, the promises that a certain company or a brand makes. We have a very prominent case, which is also can be seen at COP. It's a German car maker, BMW. For me, that's the future of the German car industry, to differentiate themselves from their competitors. And you know how quickly they are emerging, especially from China. They know how to produce cars. The Japanese have been knowing this for 50 years already, 50 years, yeah. So a German car has kind of the same engine with a Japanese or nowadays a Chinese car. But let's say the next generation of cars made in Germany, they have very high standards in terms of sustainability. It's difficult to talk about circular economy, but if you talk to the BMW guys, what their plans and ambitions are, this will differentiate themselves from their peers or competitors, and also will justify, let's say, the premium that among us you still have to pay for a German car. And that again brings me back to the UAE. BMW is already sourcing green aluminium from the one and only big manufacturer here, EGA. Yeah, well, you might argue now, well, is this really green? Is it greenwashing? And this brings me back, let's say, to the COP28. Yeah, of course, as a hardcore capitalist, I might be critical of the thousands, if not 10,000s of NGOs that are occupying the blue zone and the very few private sector representatives. But at the end of the day, we need them. It's important to have them to secure transparency and also to, let's say, critically assess reports like the one that you mentioned.
Very good. We've got maybe just 10 minutes left. I wondered if there was any questions from the audience. Sorry? Is there anybody there? Right, I'm going to throw this microphone in your general direction. So, are you ready?
Wow, it works. Thank you. Basketball player. So thank you so much for a great panel, great perspectives, whether it is on the external, on the big government, private sectors, or even the SMEs. But maybe my question would be, because maybe we all believe that sustainability starts from inside out. So maybe I will direct my question to Thomas. So we're curious how internally Arthur D. Little is implementing the sustainability practices, or how you engage your employees, the workforce, since you develop big strategies and programs for governments and private sectors. Yeah. So how do you internally have sustainability, if I would say, normalized within your operations, and how do you measure it as well? Thank you.
We do have a global strategy which is mandatory to be rolled out. Within Arthur D. Little, we have experts who gives consulting to other firms. They themselves are working with external experts, develop the whole strategy for Arthur D. Little. I have KPIs. I'm responsible for Middle East and India. So I have sustainability, carbon emission related KPIs on me. If you look at many of the clients, if you look at whether they have KPIs, they don't have KPIs, by the way. I can tell you that if you look at the organizations that you are working on, if you look at is the bonus of the level 2, if the bonus of the level 2 people linked to the sustainability or ESG or carbon emission, my thinking is 80% of them, they don't have it in their KPIs. Am I right? It is at the company level, there is a target, but if the employees are not impacted by that, they will not do anything, for sure. Let us be very clear about it, right? So, but in ADL, we have it, right? 3 to 4 years back, we eliminated complete plastic in our office. Ala is from Arthur D. Little, by the way, and she remembers that, right? I remember coming to an expo gathering 1 year back, where we had plastic bottles in the room, and I refused to start the discussion I refuse to start the discussion unless you remove the plastic bottles from the entire room. So in Arthur D. Little, we implement it, we make it mandatory. And let me also tell you something which I feel very nice about it, and I feel very bad about people like us, which are a bit older. The younger generation are very, very conscious about it. So I can just tell you, I'm just very happy. It's not about Arthur D. Little. It is just about the younger generation. So we have very young consultants, 22, 23, 24-year-old people. It's not coming from top down. It is not given as a target. They just themselves are trying to come and tell me, Thomas, what you're doing is not okay. This is not the way we should do it. We talk about this to our clients. And internally, even without a KPI, if we give a lot of exposure to the young people, they will sort it out for people like us from the older generation, right? Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. I think, and that's really pertinent because we're sat here in a university. A lot of hopefully a lot of young people with a voice there, with something to add. Back to another young person on the panel there, Maxime.
I appreciate. Thank you. You put me in this category. I think you're very right. The incentive. Also, I see an incentive, but we come back into education and say, and I think I mentioned the word social before. We talk a lot about the E today, the G, by the way, non-financial policy governance. But I think the social, we see it a lot, and to the point of Raya's question, but we see it externally with the communities we serve, which I'm in some respect a bit more excited. I like to look at our colleagues inside the 3M, but I'm more interested at how we can bring impact to the communities, you know. And I see in the UAE, for example, and it's Raya, so I don't want to say, but you know, we do a lot of things of either in the UAE or everywhere in Pakistan, in Kenya. That's the 3 countries where we have been very active. It's for on STEM education, and we come back to education, science, technology, kind of, you know, engineering and mathematics, and that's coming back to you say to the young age. To the young age, I think we still have an opportunity for our people, so people who are in companies, so a bit older. I have a story from. We were in another panel from Abu Dhabi, by the way. I was referring to Nia 2 days ago, and a gentleman say, I think a billionaire, which I'm not, but he was great, I have to say. And he said, look, 30 years ago, I had a company in Europe, and I said to all my staff, I give you $1 per kilometer if you don't come by car. You come by foot, and I give you $2 by foot, by bike. So there was an incentive like this. And he showed us a picture, super modern office, carbon neutral, and a parking slot in front. No cars. And I said, simply, when you give an incentive, everybody was coming by bike, by train, and the guys, they were super happy to make a bit more money. And actually, so I know we have education. If we are in a holistic place like here in this university, we know you will do it without any incentives because you are great and intelligent. But for older people, maybe like me, I need to have a little incentive. It will change, of course. And our children, you're right, I'm much more open on that. But I was, sorry, it was social education and incentives for me.
This billionaire came in and said, no, and he came in with a regulation, with penalties. It may have gone the other way. People may have taken the hardship and
There were no penalties.
But it was a positive.
You will not make a little bit more money, and it was a bit a game at the beginning, and it was extremely successful.
Yeah, that's very good.
I would even say that the ones that are not accelerating their efforts to become more sustainable, they will be out of business. We had a discussion on Sunday night, and one of my members sat next to me. It's a big logistics firm, and she said, for us, it's business critical. If we don't do it, we are out. And that's one of the big ones. Yeah, margins are razor thin, right? How do we differentiate from the yellow guys, the red guys, from the blue guys? At the end of the day, they all have trucks and planes and know how to transport a parcel. But maybe in 2 years or in 5 years, this is how you can differentiate. You can make a difference in the market. It also affects us as a very humble business association. One day, my members will ask me, what's your carbon footprint? I need to enter a figure into my vendor management or into my ERP. It's happening. It's going to happen. Maybe next year or in 2 years' time. I don't know.
You're right, and it shouldn't be a nice to have. It needs to come in pretty quick. Sorry, Thomas, you seem very eager to.
I just wanted to give a slightly different perspective on incentive, just to take the Arthur D. Little case and even just one more example about staying in hotels. See, when we try to tell our clients that You know, we don't have to fly in 10 people to give you a consulting advice, or we can do it over a very good Zoom call, but we don't pass on the benefit to the client. See, if I don't think any consulting firm, including Arthur D. Little, I'm trying to do that, but the industry doesn't do that. Say, if you allow us not to travel, we will pass on the benefit to you. We don't do that. Let me give you a very simple example in a hotel. Every hotel is using this to reduce the number of times they are washing the bed sheets and towels, correct? In my view, they are doing it to save their money. Now, I can guarantee you, if the hotels tell me today, Thomas, if you don't want us to wash your bed sheets and towels, I will give you 500 points, or I will reduce the room rent by $10. I'm sure many more of us who are staying in hotels will not ask the bed sheet and the 100 towels to be changed. We will not. But today we don't bother about it because we are not incentivized. The hotels are really misusing this, in my view, misusing it. They are saving money and trying to tell us, "Oh, please save the planet." I'm sorry to put it so bluntly. They're just trying to save their own money on washing, and they don't pass it on to us. I repeat, if they pass it on to us, you will wash half the number of bed sheets and towels you're washing in the hotel today. But is anybody doing it? Nobody is doing it. So let us be also very clear about the incentive. What is the motivation behind incentive, and do we really mean it? And in my view, 50% of the time we mean it, 50% of the time we are just using it to create additional benefits for us. You see.
And I think you get to the same end goal. So it's deciding where you want to be and making that journey. That's very, very sensible approach, I think. Any other questions from the audience that Raya can throw the microphone to? We have one from the front row here.
Basketball or football?
That's it, Raya. Amazing. Round of applause, please.
Thank you. Well, it is not a question, it's basically a comment. I have been in this Herriot Climate Hub in a lot of panels, but the discussions that I have heard today, I mean, the conversation was really, really good. I really like it. I just want to congratulate you because you have shared data, you have shared your opinions, and also the need of regulations, measurement, the need of make a decision not only for the benefit of the company that you're working on, but also for the benefit of the planet. And the message was really clear. So I just want to mention that because sometimes when you read delivering a transparent transition, measurement and regulation, sometimes it is easy like to understand a little bit, but then in my case, you catch my heart. I mean, it's really good, really good. And actually, now I have more insights to have open conversations in the market about the need of regulations, and not specifically more regulations, but more efficient regulations in order to have a greater impact. So basically, I just want to say thank you so much. It has been a fantastic panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's probably, it's time now. That's probably a great way to end, I think. So if you can please give the panel a round of applause. It's been really great. And thank you so much for joining. And as I said, the millions of people that have joined us on the webinar as well, thank you so much for your thorough engagement. And we'll continue this discussion offline probably. Thank you so much, guys. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your time and energy. And hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Good question. Thank you. Back to
It was recorded.
It was recorded already. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they told me it was recorded. I didn't see anything.
Okay. Because I will share it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
but thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. I have to add to what you have seen. No, that's right. You two meetings. You can name drop a lot more. BMW is very good.
Yes, you see? Yes, really good. I really like it. I mean, the conversation is really top.
What are you trying to get at?
You have to tell them. I mean, they will like
Sure.
you also. Because can we ask? Yeah, of course you can go. Definitely. Yeah, he's with you. want to ask for questions?
Oh, so you do, well, Oliver has to leave.
Yeah. I don't know.
If the other guys, please.
Jonathan, can I cancel the recording now?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Could you please share with me?
And me as well.
Yeah, sure,
Yes, it would be
absolutely.
really good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let me stop.
Oh, no, thank you so